Good evening, I'm Ted Koppel, and this is Nightline.
Государство Константина Устиновича Черненко.
This time, the Soviets seem to have opted for a long-term change. The man who took charge within hours of Konstantin Chernenko's death represents a new generation. But what else does he represent? And what, if anything, should we expect of those U.S.-Soviet arms talks, which get underway, as scheduled, tomorrow morning? We'll talk live with Henry Kissinger, with former British Minister of Defense Denis Healey, and with a former high-ranking Soviet diplomat, Arkady Shevchenko.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
The transitional period, it would seem, is over. Another Soviet leader who was too old and too sick when he took power to hold on to it has died. And now a 54-year-old has taken over, someone who, theoretically at least, will be around for a generation. Get used to the name, Mikhail Gorbachev. According to at least normal life expectancy, Gorbachev should have plenty of time to put his mark on Soviet affairs. And take note of something else. Tomorrow morning in Geneva, just a few hours before the late Soviet president, Konstantin Chernenko, is buried, U.S.-Soviet arms talks get underway. Certainly, American negotiators would have understood if their Soviet counterparts had requested a 48-hour delay, but no one even asked. We begin our examination of this new chapter in U.S.-Soviet affairs by turning to Arkady Shevchenko, a former aide to Soviet Foreign Minister Gromyko, later an undersecretary of the UN, and even later a defector to the United States. Mr. Shevchenko, explain that to me. Why this urgency to continue with those U.S.-Soviet arms talks as scheduled?
The Soviet leadership attach great importance to the forthcoming the arms control negotiations. There are both domestic and external pressure on the Soviet leadership, and above all, they are interested in preserving what they call the strategic military parity.
No, I understand that. What I'm talking about now is a very, very narrow question. No one would have thought anything was wrong. No one would have believed that the Soviets placed any lesser premium on those talks if they'd asked for a 24-hour delay, a 48-hour delay. Why move ahead literally as the funeral arrangements are underway?
Well, why not? I see no problem there.
Well, I assure you, if an American president had died, that American negotiators would come back for the funeral.
No, I'm sorry, but Chernenko cannot be compared with the American president. Soviet Union, Kremlin had the collective leadership, a few key men who've been running the country, not only in the Chernenko period of time, but in a period when Andropov was sick and even before. So for them it was no surprise, no problem. They knew what is going to happen, and why to delay negotiations.
All right, no big deal then.
No big deal.
All right, no big deal then that you have a 54-year-old party chairman now? No big deal that he's a man who's going to be around for 20 years, maybe?
Let me tell you, Ted, that first of all, we have to be more careful in talking that the Gorbachev already become a person who has a power which Brezhnev had or Khrushchev before had, because still majority in the Politburo in the hands of the old people. The party apparatus in the Soviet Union is an older man, and he has a lot of time to go, before he can consolidate his power and become a real leader.
I heard one television correspondent, I'm not even sure if it was on our network, but one television correspondent today speak rather glowingly of this Kennedy-like image. Here you've got this young, enthusiastic, vital new Soviet leader with this very attractive wife, lovely young children. Does that make any difference at all?
Don't be impressed by that. It's of course it's very good for the public. And after the Soviet leaders for so many years been actually invalids who disappear from the public opinion for so long. Gorbachev, who is an intelligent man, who is a very social and well-educated and so on and so forth, but we have to have no illusions that we still deal not with one person. We deal with the Soviet system. We deal with the Politburo. We deal with the party apparatus in the Soviet Union. And not just a new leader. He would be more dynamic, with a new style, perhaps with some changes in the domestic policy of the Soviet Union. But I doubt that it would be any changes in the foreign policy of the Soviet Union.
All right, give me a very quick, if you would, thumbnail sketch. You met him back in 1977. Your impressions of him as, in terms that we can understand.
My impression was very good about him, and it's not only was my impression, because he was a good manager in industry, in agriculture, in Stavropolsky Krai when he was a first secretary, and he impressed very much the leader of the Soviet Union who had been coming to resort in Kislovodsk, Kosygin, Andropov, and others, and I think he made a career there, because many other regional leaders in the Soviet Union, the party leaders, they didn't have such an opportunity. And I think that there is a potential in Gorbachev for the future, but let's not exaggerate at this stage. Let's wait for some time before we come to any conclusion what kind of a leader he will be. In the past, you know, how many mistakes been done about the Soviet leaders. Let's wait and see what he will do in several years, and then we will come to a conclusion.
On that note of caution, let's take a break. Later, we will talk with former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger and with former British Minister of Defense Dennis Healey about the impact of Gorbachev's accession to the power on the Geneva arms talks. But first, when we return, Nightline correspondent James Walker looks at the issues the two superpowers must deal with at Geneva.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Sears.
It seems the more time you spend making money, the less time you have to deal with it. The hours you keep is the reason for the hours we keep. At the Sears Financial Network Center, we're open nights, weekends, every hour Sears is open. With the expert help of Dean Witter Investments, Coldwell Banker Real Estate, and Allstate Insurance. Be sure to stop in at Sears for the expert help that's available when you are. The Sears Financial Network. Trust us to make it work for you.
Recently, an astute businessman made a very astute business decision to stay at Sheraton hotels exclusively. Because each time he stayed at Sheraton, he earned 500 to 750 American Airlines Advantage Miles. Advantage Miles that not only allowed him to fly free, but also allowed him to get away from business in and get American Airlines Advantage Miles without ever leaving the ground.
Love the life at Sheraton.
When he's finally fixed the muffler, when she's finally learned the game, when you've done a little something that makes you feel ashamed, that's when you should send the Tickler Bouquet from Emma's Flowers. It's a fun bouquet of fresh flowers featuring its own special tickler, and it can help you say, thanks for the peace and quiet. Congrats on scoring big. Sorry about the bad break. Just call or stop by Emma's Flowers. After all, everyone could use a little tickle now and then.
Remember when interest rates were affordable? Well, Southeast AMC Jeep Renault is bringing back the good old days with 8.5% APR on all new Renault Alliances and Encores. That's right, 8.5% APR. If you've been looking for a reason to buy a new car, you just got one. 8.5 at Southeast AMC Jeep Renault, 2800 Knowlesville Road, Nashville.
A videotape crackdown on drunk drivers is forcing confessions and working.
It's just all over once they see the tape.
Tomorrow, watch ABC's World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
When the U.S. delegation to the arms talks arrived in Geneva this weekend, Chief U.S. Negotiator Max Kampelman warned that the differences between Washington and Moscow are profound. The Soviet delegation on its arrival Sunday sounded a rare note of agreement, at least on that point. But the Russians blamed the U.S. and President Reagan's Star Wars proposal for making the task of arms control so difficult. Here's a report from Nightline correspondent James Walker on the issues that must be dealt with.
The selection of Mikhail Gorbachev as Communist Party secretary raises a crucial question about the future course of the Geneva arms control talks. Namely, will Gorbachev be able to assert himself as his predecessors Chernenko and Andropov could not, and fashion his own arms control strategy? The last Soviet leader to do that was Leonid Brezhnev. The place, Moscow, May 1972. In a warm and cordial atmosphere, Brezhnev sat down with President Nixon to sign the historic SALT I Strategic Arms Limitation Agreement. The centerpiece was the ABM, or Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. Both sides agreed to deploy only token defenses against a nuclear missile attack by the other. The agreement began an era of détente and heightened prospects for future arms control. Here on the frigid plains of North Dakota can be found one legacy of the ABM Treaty. Each side was permitted only one ABM base. The U.S. chose to put its here, defending an area populated by offensive missiles, not by people. The complex went operational in 1974, but was quickly shut down by a budget-cutting Congress. This abandoned anti-missile base is a monument to the idea that war in the nuclear age was best prevented if both sides were vulnerable to nuclear annihilation. The doctrine was called Mutual Assured Destruction. Its nickname, appropriately, was MAD. MAD was the basis of an arms control process that effectively killed the idea in this country of trying to defend against a nuclear missile attack. But all that changed on March 23, 1983, when President Reagan offered a different vision of a future dominated by something other than the balance of terror.
What if free people could live secure in the knowledge that their security did not rest upon the threat of instant U.S. retaliation to deter a Soviet attack, that we could intercept and destroy strategic ballistic missiles before they reached our own soil or that of our allies?
Ambassador Gerard Smith helped negotiate the SALT I Treaty. Smith believes that by resurrecting the idea of missile defenses, President Reagan undermined the basis of 15 years of arms control efforts.
The premise of the ABM Treaty, I think, has been proved correct, that if you have a hold on defenses, the prospect of getting limitations on offensives is somewhat better.
That theory has been totally disproven because, as you know, the Soviet arms buildup in the strategic forces continued year after year. For the last 15 years, they've had the biggest nuclear buildup in history, the ABM Treaty notwithstanding. And indeed, as we now look back, many of us realize there was an intellectual mistake was made.
Fred E. Clay also worked on the SALT negotiations. Now a top Pentagon official, he offers a quite different approach to arms reductions.
We will, as the President indicated, use the negotiations in Geneva to discuss a different concept where we both could move to a relationship where defensive forces become increasingly more dominant, where we could make this transition in a stable fashion, and where we then could reduce offensive forces sharply and eventually eliminate nuclear offensive systems.
The Reagan strategy emphasizing defense relies on scientific development since the early 1970s. The ABM systems of that time used high-speed rockets with nuclear warheads to intercept incoming weapons high above the United States. But this type of defense was easily overwhelmed by another technical innovation that made it possible to pack several nuclear warheads into the nose cone of a single missile. Now, recent laboratory experiments with lasers and particle beams offer hope that an effective non-nuclear missile defense may now be possible. These weapons would be based in space to destroy Soviet missiles shortly after launch, before they can deploy their numerous, harder-to-hit warheads. President Reagan's $30 billion research program on these defensive technologies is considered by some to be an additional obstacle to arms control.
What I'm afraid of is that by seeking a technical solution, we are preventing the arrival of a real solution which lies in agreements between the two parties.
The two negotiating teams are now in Geneva, set to begin their long-awaited talks tomorrow. President Reagan appears determined to go ahead with his Strategic Defense Initiative, hoping that it will lead to a more secure world. The Soviets are equally determined to stop it, saying that it can only set off a new arms race in space. The death of Konstantin Chernenko and the rise of Mikhail Gorbachev seemed to have had no effect on Soviet strategy in Geneva. The differences between the two sides are so profound that no one is expecting an agreement anytime soon. This is James Walker for Nightline in Washington.
When we come back, we'll discuss the impact of the Kremlin changeover on the Geneva talks with former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger and with Dennis Healey, former British Minister of Defense, who talked at length with Gorbachev when the Soviet official visited London last December.
Burger King does it again.
Perhaps you think we're reminding you that the Whopper beats the Big Mac, right? Really now, would Burger King do that?
Sure we would!
But this time it's breakfast. Because our crust sandwich just beat the stuffing out of Egg McMuffin 2-to-1 for best taste. Our flaky croissant filled with golden eggs, melted cheese, and sausage bacon or ham.
First the Whopper, now the crust sandwich.
Well, win a few, win a few.
Aren't you hungry for Burger King now?
Once upon a time, there were three little
pigs, Grandpa.
pigs.
Can we watch television, Grandpa?
When it's as important as their eyesight, trust Pearl. The doctor will give them a thorough exam and the right prescription.
You'll see it in his eyes when his spirits start to rise. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
Take 93.
S&K's entire stock of winter suits and sport coats is now 50 to 66% off. That's 50 to 66% off at least 20 major brand names. Plus, you can get this classic all-season Navy hopscotch blazer, $145 value for only $79.95. Hopsick.
By the time you get it right, the sale will be over. Do you mind?
Certainly.
100 Oaks Mall and Outlets Limited, Goodlettsville.
It's the first anniversary sale of the new Lawhon Furniture Company. We're celebrating our new look and new showrooms with new low furniture prices. This sofa love seat combination in contemporary styling with plump loose pillow back reversible seat cushions sells most places $8.99. Our price for 2 days only, $4.44 both pieces at the new Lawhon Furniture showrooms.
Better living at Lawhon's. That's a Lawhon guarantee.
Lincoln Mercury is on the move with the 1985 Lincoln Town Car. No wonder sales are up 105%. While the competition's downsized, Lincoln Town Car remains undiminished with more interior room than Cadillac Fleetwood Sedan for $2,008 less. Experience the full-size room, ride, and comfort of Lincoln Town Car. The highest quality cars made in America are here now at the Sign of the Cat.
Joining us live now from our affiliate KTRK in Houston is Henry Kissinger, former Secretary of State. And in our New York studios, Dennis Healey, British Labour Party spokesman on foreign affairs and former Minister of Defense. Mr. Healey has met and talked with both Mikhail Gorbachev and the new Soviet leader and with his predecessor, Konstantin Chernenko. I hope you'll understand if we focus greater interest at the moment on the man who has taken power. Do you accept what Mr. Shevchenko said at the top of this program, that it'll be a long time before he really asserts control?
No, I don't actually agree with that. I think to begin with, the age of the Politburo has gone down a good deal since Andropov died, because the old men who died have not been replaced, and the young men whom Andropov brought in, like Borotnikov, Aliyev, Chebrikov, are now major figures along with Romanov and Gorbachev himself. So I think Gorbachev's influence, the fact that he's been clearly slated to take over for the last year, will be very substantial right away, but not in the arms control field. When we met him, we found that he constantly asked General Chervov, who is an old veteran right back from Salt I, to answer the detailed questions. I think Gorbachev's main interest will be seeing that something is done to reduce the crushing burden of armaments on the Soviet Union, because he's primarily concerned to revive the Soviet economy. He knows that can't happen unless they can provide the sort of advanced consumer goods which skilled workers in Russia now want, which they can't have so long as they're spending this money on arms. And don't forget, according to the CIA, Since 1976, Soviet arms spending has been increasing at only half the rate of American arms spending, and since President Reagan came in, American spending's gone up 50% in real terms and Soviet only 10%, but even so, it's an unacceptable burden for the Russians if they want to improve their economic performance.
Dr. Kissinger, that then poses the Russians with a considerable dilemma, because if, as President Reagan has said, he intends to go ahead with this strategic defense initiative, Star Wars as it's come to be known, that is going to be a multi-billion-dollar program, and if the Soviets have to match it, it'll cost them far more than they've had to spend.
Well, I'd like to make two comments. First, I don't think one can judge Gorbachev's influence only by his relationship to the older generation. In the past, any new general secretary has had to assert himself even against his contemporaries. And the exact lineup between Gorbachev, Romanov, Aliyev, and all the others will not become apparent for a year or two. And so he will have to spend a fair amount of his time on consolidating his domestic position. Secondly, of course, the strategic defense will impose a burden on the Soviet Union. The question is, what kind of an arms agreement are they prepared to make in order to avoid that burden, and must we give up the concept of strategic defense in order to reach it? And there, I believe that simply reducing offensive weapons at the number of weapons that have been reached will not really make a difference, a significant difference, to the threat to humanity, and therefore it may ease the burden to the Soviet economy somewhat. It will not change the basic strategic equation particularly.
Let me go back to a question that I asked Mr. Shevchenko at the beginning of this program, and it wasn't as whimsical a question as it may have seemed. I am wondering why it is that and I interpret it, and give me your sense of it if you would, Dr. Kissinger, I interpret it a little bit as Soviet posturing for publicity purposes, this emphasis on the U.S.-Soviet arms talks, which from everything I've heard are expected to go on for years before anyone expects anything to come out of them. Why in that context was another day or two so important to them?
Well, because I think they wanted to emphasize for the American public the importance of it. I don't think that 48 hours would have made any difference to the outcome of these talks. Incidentally, I believe that the talks will conclude fairly rapidly. I think it's something like 18 months. I want to repeat that the significant problem is, what is the agreement going to look like? This debate about strategic defense is taking on somewhat absurd proportions. We have spent, President Reagan has dedicated $30 billion to research. President Carter had dedicated $19 billion for research. So we are speaking about $11 billion difference over a 5-year period. And what exactly is it that the Soviets are asking us to do? Are we supposed to stop research? Are we supposed to stop testing? What is it that they want from us?
I think what they want, they've made quite clear. I talked about this to Zagladin when I was in Moscow in November, and also to Mr. Gorbachev. They're worried, like the last 3 secretaries of state under the last 3 American presidents, that President Reagan's stated aim is unachievable, that the most America can hope to achieve is point defense of some of its land-based missiles, and that if that's the purpose, to the Russians it looks as if they're trying to prepare for a possible first strike against the Soviet Union, so that only a small proportion of the Soviet missiles can come back at the United States, and enough of those can be stopped on the way by this system. And I think the Russians are desperately anxious not to stop research, because we all know you can't verify what happens in laboratories or people's minds, but to stop things which can be verified, which are visible, like the tests of components in a space-based system, the shuttle test, which is now planned, I gather, for 2 years' time. And the most interesting thing is President Reagan did offer last year the possibility of a moratorium on anti-satellite tests. Mr. Burt of the State Department let it be known he was in favor of this. It now seems to have fallen out of the window, and I think the basic objective must be to get that sort of agreement quickly, because the thing is urgent.
All right,
the Russians, let me make this point. The Russians
we're
have
coming down to our last couple of minutes.
Could
Mr.
I just
Healy?
make this central point?
Please.
This is urgent, and that's why the talks have started right away, because the Russians have to decide their next 5-year plan at the end of this year and fill all the vacancies in the Central Committee and the Politburo. And if progress hasn't been made in that period, then the risk is that anything that Gorbachev hopes to achieve may be frustrated.
But it doesn't make any sense to ask us to stop development of weapons that won't exist for 10 years before we even know by how far they are willing to reduce their offensive weapons, especially the heavy weapons that are aimed at our missiles. And moreover, if they are worried that all we can achieve is a point defense of our missiles, their retaliatory capacity will remain intact, because they can always attack our cities if we should attack their missiles.
Dr. Kissinger, let me jump in and pick up on something you said a moment ago. You expressed the view that you thought these talks would actually achieve something, or at least be over, within 18 months. Why?
I think that if one reads between the lines what everybody is saying, the outline of some agreement like SALT II reduced to a level of 1,800, intermediate-range missiles limited to something like a formula of whatever the number is on each side, and then some form of words that permits research to continue and defers testing for further negotiation seems to me very probable. I wouldn't be very crazy about such an agreement, but that seems to me, between the lines, is what people are saying on our side.
All right, Mr. Healy, a final thought just on that. Do you think these talks will be long-lasting, and do you think that they will achieve anything?
My
We're down to our
fear
last
is
20
that
seconds.
if they don't achieve something quickly, events in the Soviet Union may preclude any real advance. And it's no good talking in terms of SALT I and II. Some of the new weapons being developed, anti-satellite systems which could destroy the eyes and ears, which give early warning to both sides, cruise missiles which are easily hidden, can carry nuclear or conventional weapons, those things will be beyond the point of no return unless agreement is reached to stop them in the next year.
Mr. Healy, we're beyond the point of no return also. I'm afraid we're out of time. I thank you very much, Dr. Kissinger. I thank you. I'll be back in just a moment.
I got the same card as you, Coburn.
Huh? Oh, that's nice.
You don't have to be a big cheese to own a MasterCard.
I know.
The same card you bop around the south of France with, I used to buy wool.
Wool?
So you're not as hotsy-totsy as you think, Mr. Tinseltown.
May I buy you a drink?
Anytime, Jimbo.